Good evening and welcome to Soulfire Farm's Food Preservation Workshop with Ria Ibrahim Taylor. My name is Leah Penniman. I use all pronouns and I'm the farm manager and one of the co-directors here at Soulfire Farm in Mohican Territory, Grafton, New York. I want to start first by welcoming everyone to this program with a special welcome to our Solidarity Share members, the folks who enjoy the abundance of the farm every week through doorstep delivery, and also a special welcome to our Soulfire in the City members who are growing food in their own backyards and side yards and churches and schools in collaboration with Soulfire Farm. It's really an honor to be with you, and it is a time of year of abundance. It's a time of year full of hot peppers and cabbages, full of beans and squash, and what better time than now to have a food preservation workshop. So as always, we want to start with some acknowledgments. We want to begin by thanking our ancestors. None of us got here by ourselves. All of us are here because of the fortitude, the courage, the foresight of those who came before us. And I particularly want to call in my ancestor, Grandmummy Brownie Lee McCullough, who was the person who first taught me how to garden. She taught me how to grow strawberries and crab apples and how to preserve them in the form of jam. And so I welcome you as well to think of an ancestor who helped you feel connected to food or land or farming, and write their name in the chat so we can welcome them to be with us. So go ahead and write names of the ancestors you want to call in the chat. Also, want to give thanks and homage to the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohican Nation. We are on unceded Mohican territory, and we take that responsibility really seriously to be in solidarity, to help disrupt the pipelines, to rematriate seeds, to grant a cultural respect easement, and generally to do things that the Mohican Nation asks us to do. And especially the day after Indigenous Peoples Day, it's even more poignant to think about how do we be in solidarity with movements like Land Back and Indigenous sovereignty. And I welcome you also, whether you're in Mohican territory or not, to write the name of the lands, the people of the lands of whom you're on, in the chat as well. So with that being said, I'm going to take a moment to introduce our featured speaker, Ria Ibrahim Taylor. She is farm-to-table manager at Soulfire Farm and brings an ancestral passion for food, coming from a family of farmers, fishermen, and chefs. Her cooking traditions are intimately bound with her homeland of Indonesia, and she learned to cook with her mother and family almost from birth. In addition to cooking, she was a founder of Kombes Makassar, a community-oriented anti-littering and trash management organization focusing on urban agriculture and building community solutions to Indonesia's recycling and trash challenges. She's also beginning a project as a rural farmer and homesteader and is most excited to be raising ducks. Ria has been working with Soulfire Farm since 2017, and I am very honored to call Ria a coworker and friend, and so excited for what she's about to share with us. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Ria to come on camera and mic and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this workshop preservation with me tonight. My name is Ria Ibrahim Taylor. I am from Indonesia, like what Leah say, and I'm so excited tonight for learning together how to preserve food. So tonight we want to learn about food preservation. What is food preservation? Food preservation is any of number method by which food is kept from spoilage after harvest. The oldest method of drying and fermentation. We know that fermentation has been around thousand of years to preserve food. And the modern method include canning, pasteurization, irradiation, freezing, and the addition of chemical. Next. Drying method. So drying method is dehydration food is that removes enough moisture from food so bacteria like fungi, yeast, and molds cannot grow. Next. Drying herbs. Hang dry herbs in bundle, no direct sunlight. So I like to dry my herbs, no direct sunlight. So it preserves the color of drying herbs. I have one example to dry herb. This is already dry. Like this is a blue fern. It's already dry from the farm. And if you have a dehydrator, you can use dehydrator to dry herbs. And also you can use oven to dry herbs. Next. This picture, the left picture is Romano tomato. This method is using sun to dry tomatoes, and the right is after picture. So I harvest the tomatoes and cut it in half and sprinkle salt on top. What salt do is to help the moisture out of the tomatoes and also help it to bacteria not grow in tomato. And it take about 6 hours a day, and depends how big the tomato, sometimes take 2 or 3 days, and depend how strong the sun is. So sun-dried tomato is very high on umami aroma, and it's really good in dressing or soup, something like that. Next. Which I talked about before, oven-dried tomatoes and peppers. So we've been asked what I'm gonna do with my peppers and all tomatoes in harvest season. So in the right picture is before and the left is after. I don't have dehydrator, so I use oven sometimes. So I use the lowest temperature in my oven to dry tomatoes, peppers. Is my oven, the lowest temperature in my oven is like 200 Fahrenheit. So that will take about 5 to 7 hours. But do check once a while when you do this method. And how to know when it's done is like if you touch it, it's crisp and there is no moisture out of the tomatoes or peppers. Next. So storing dry herbs and vegetable. This is how I storing my vegetable or dry corn, dry peppers, dry tomatoes, dry herbs, and seed. Put it in mason jar, airtight container, so the moisture not come inside the container and will spoil the vegetable or the herbs. Kept it in not hot temperature, it's a cool temperature. Next. Freezing. So this is one of the method, the modern method to preserve the food, freezing. Next. How freezing preserve food safely. Freezing does not actually sterilize food the way exposure to extremely hot temperature can. Instead, it renders bacteria. It also drastically slows the rate of chemical reaction that will otherwise cause food to spoil. I always think like before I learned about this, I was like, oh, let me just put my vegetable in the freezer. It will be go forever, will be preserved. But actually, if you just harvest basil from the garden and put it in Ziploc bag and put it in the freezer, it will slowly decompose because it has the bacteria in it. So we need to blanch it. So next, this is why we need to blanch the vegetable before freezing. Because the temperature in your freezer are too low for harmful bacteria to survive. They do not destroy the enzymes whose job is to it is to decay organic matter. So like I said before, basil or your kale, broccoli, any vegetable, if you just harvest from your garden and put it in the freezer, it will, in a few months when you defrost it, it will be looking like not very good and pleasant. So blanch it, how we blanch it, I usually boil water and then just put it like real quick, or 3 minutes, or depend how big's the vegetable, and put it in cold water, like hot and cold plunge water, and then let it dry a little bit and put it in a Ziploc bag or freezer container, and then put in the freezer. Next. So how long food keep in the freezer? Bread 3 months, soaked bean and not cooked at 4 months, and cooked beans 6 months, cooked rice 4 months. We always end up like so much leftover, and it'll end up for 6 months, and vegetable asparagus 1 year. I like to do a stock this time of year, and then just put it in daily container, airtight container, put in the freezer, and then it will last for 6 months, and we'll able to make soup until spring without making stock from starch. So next. Okay, this is boiling water bath canning, which is when we ask someone preserve food, we always think preserving food is always the first thing came in our mind is canning. Actually, canning is very like a very young how to preserve food. Is only less than 200 years old. Next. Yeah, canning is a new method of preserving food. There are 2 methods in canning. First, boiling water bath, and the pressure canner. So, but tonight, we're only going to talk about boiling water bath. Boiling water bath canning, it requires minimal equipment. We just large deep pot plus canning jars and lids. So we need to remember that we do canning only safe for high acid food. The food in the jars need to be 4.6 or lower pH. The temperature water boils at sea level 212 Fahrenheit. So this is help destroying most bacteria, yeast, and molds in acid food that can make food go bad. And we also need to remember the danger zone. The temperatures between 40 Fahrenheit or 140 Fahrenheit, like 95 Fahrenheit, this temperature allow rapid growth of bacteria like fungi, yeast, and molds, and it will cause botulism. And botulism is a food poison that we don't want to eat that. So the best storage temperature for canned and dry food is between 17 Fahrenheit to 50 Fahrenheit. And for frozen food, 0 Fahrenheit or lower. Next. So as you see in the left picture, that is equipment for boiling water canner. So what's the step? We need to sterilize the empty jars. Sterilization of empty jars, and then we need to wash and rinsing thoroughly and submerge jars right side up, fill jars. So this is the jar. We put it in the pot and just like submerge, and then a full inside of the jar is full with water. And then it has to be like an inch above the top of the jar. And then we put in pot, bring water to a boil. So boil for minutes 1,000 feet when you leave, like it's above sea levels. And fill jars with pickled tomatoes. So do not boil the canning lids. Ruin the. So the jars, we have this canning lids. We do not want to boil this because you see this, it ruins the suction like this. You boil this, it will ruin the jar lid. So don't boil this. It's not, do not boil this when you're canning. Next. How to process jar of food in boiling water. So the jar is already sterilized. We put the food inside the jar and we put like right this. And then after that, we put the lid, close the lid, and then put in a jar the boiling water with the rock on the bottom. Process jars in the boiling water bath when it's vigorously boil. And we need to start the time when you see the water's bubbling, boiling, rapidly boil. And then after that, it takes, you need to follow the recipe when it says 25 minutes, but 25 minutes and follow the 25 minutes recipe for boiling the jars. And cooling down, place jar under disturb for 6 hours at least. And then check the seals, inner lid with remain securely fastened. So if you check the lid like this, if you hear it, that's not seal. But if you press it down and it's not flexible, that's seal. So what do you want to do if that happened, if not seal? You can do it again, or you can just place your food in the fridge because it's not safe if you let it like that. So next. Yeah, this is what I was talking about before. You need to know where you live, like the sea levels. Like, for example, if the recipe calls for processing jars of tomatoes in boiling water bath for 35 minutes, and you live at 5,000 feet above sea level, you need to process them for 45 minutes instead. So follow this every like 3,000 to 6,000 feet, increase time by 10 minutes. So yeah, that. Next. This is very important. Please do not do this. Do not use oven or dishwasher to sterilize canning jars. Don't do it. And do not skip boiling water bath or pressure canner. Processing food for canning foods, and instead turn jars upside down like this for a few minutes before setting them upright. So do not do this. It's not food safety. And do not pour melted paraffin wax over hot food and consider it seal. Paraffin is petroleum product. It's very unhealthy. So also could create an imperfect seal. So please do not do this, remember. Next. What is fermentation? Natural process through which microorganisms like yeast and bacteria convert carb or such as starch and sugar into alcohol or acid. Fermentation we've been around, it's like since 6,000 before century. Can you imagine that? It's been a long time. Next. So this is, for example, type of fermentation. Gari, West Africa. So gari is root cassava that been like fermented to prevent a foodborne illness in cassava, because there is something in cassava, if you just eat it plain, it will like upset your stomach. And tempeh, Indonesia, from my country. I love tempeh. And natto miso from Japan. kimchi from Korean, mom fermented seafood from Vietnam, dushi fermented black bean China, sauerkraut Central Europe, yogurt Middle East and Central Asia, and wine, many more. So there's a lot of type of fermentation that are very good for us, for our mental health, for good bacteria in our tummy to our brain. So it's a long distance relationship with that. Next. This is very exciting. I love lactofermentation. What is lactofermentation? It's fermenting by the good bacteria called lactobacillus. So this bacteria convert sugar naturally present in the fruit or vegetable into lactic acid. And what is lactic acid? Lactic acid is natural preservation that helps fight bad bacteria and preserve not only the flavor and texture, but also its nutrients. Very exciting. Next. Somebody else asked, like, how do you know the lactofermentation will serve? You just put food in room temperature. So let's talk about it. How lactofermentation safely preserve food. So salt-tolerant bacteria called genus Lactobacillus already exists on the surface of vegetable. So like this daikon I harvest today, it's already have like genus Lactobacillus exists in this. And then the salty brines, when you mix it with salt, the lactobacillus eliminate or kill the harmful bacteria. And after that, the fermentation begin. And then lactobacillus convert lactose and other sugar in the food into lactic acid. And then lactic acid creates a low pH acidic environment that harmful bacteria cannot survive. So there's so many bacteria in this universe. There's a bad and there's a good bacteria. And then genus Lactobacillus is a good bacteria that if it can kill all the bad bacteria if it's mixed with salt. And this pH environment kill the bad bacteria. That's why it's safe to eat lacto-fermented food. Next. So what to expect fermentation? Within a day or two, at room temperature, some bubbles on the surface. The liquid will change from clear to having slightly cloudier appearance. It will develop a pleasantly light sour smell. Think like pickle. That smells like a little bit funky, but it's good. Next. Okay, important. The hotter the environment, the more salt you need in your initial brine. But it's very, very good to do fermentation this time of year because the weather is not too hot and it's not too cold. And remember to always use filter or non-chlorinate water. Why? Because chlorine water, they made us supposed to kill all the bacteria. Good bacteria, bad bacteria, there's not gonna live in chlorine water. So it's important to use a not chlorinated water or filter water. And fermented food sitting in a container with a lot of air space. So see if you put you use this big jar and this is your fermented food and there's a space between this. It will be ruin all the fermentation because the airspace above it tends to lift up out of liquid that is preserving it and discolor unattractively. Use glass and ceramic when you do fermentation, not using plastic. And then the last, canning lacto-fermented will kill all the bacteria. So If you want to can your lacto fermentation, just do pickle, because after canning the fermented food, it will kill all the good bacteria that is supposed to be really good for the gut health. Next. A type of lacto fermentation food: kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, daily dill pickle. So next, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Ria. Oh my goodness, that was just a lot of amazing information, and I feel super excited to ferment and can and dry all the things that are coming off the farm. So folks who are just arriving, welcome again to Food Preservation. We are going to have a discussion in just a moment. Then while Ria prepares for a live demonstration of some of these techniques. So really, really super excited about that. What I would invite you all to do now, we're going to use the chat. You're welcome to come off video so we can see, but we're going to use the chat. And the question that I would love everyone to answer in the chat is, what is an example of a food preservation method from your family or your cultural heritage? So I'll type that as well. So the question is, what is a food preservation method from your culture, your family, or cultural heritage? So take a moment. If you want to come off video so you can like wave at everybody and write the answer, it'll be a way that we can get to know each other a little bit. So we'll do that while Ria sets up for the demo and take a moment to read what other people have to share.
Hi, welcome to live demo of making kimchi in sulfite farm way. So these are Napa cabbage. I already washed it. I just harvested this today, and was like whole, and I cut it in half. And now, so I cut it like this, and this, and just like strip it like that. There. So we talk about lacto fermentation. So this is the vegetable. And salt. It's salt. This is how we do it. I like to put salt, sprinkle all here. And then all here. All layer has to be salt. Salt, salt, salt. All layer. So just put it salt. And this here. Salt. Very salty cabbage. So this is a very good time of year where the traditional in Korea, this is called cold crop, like cold vegetable. And then they harvest this time of year and make fermentation, and we'll enjoy this until spring. And so it will look like this, and we will put it in. So I usually let this ferment until all the moisture out, all the water out for 4 hours or overnight. So what we expect after that, here. So there you go. Do you see how it changed? What's the difference? No salt with salt. And there's no water. This is the water all from the Nava cabbage. And all this like good bacteria already lifted here. And the bad bacteria is already gone. So this is super salty cabbage. What we want to do is wash them. We go to the sink, and this is how we wash. This is our cold water, and you just wash them very good like that. And then here. The next step is make the paste. Very exciting. So before make the paste, we have to make the porridge. 2 cups of water. 2 cups of water, room temperature, and 2 tablespoons glutinous rice or sticky rice powder. Just put it there. Mix it all and put it in the stove. Okay, that will take 10 minutes. Next, we want to use apple, garlic, and onion. So this apple from the farm, I harvested today, onion and garlic. Let's cut them, cut, peel. So what, maybe a question, why apple? Why do you put apple in your kimchi? So like bacteria eat sugar. We use apple to feed the bacteria. Natural sugar from the apple, and other vegetable also has sugar, but apple has high sugar in it. Or you can use pear. Or if you don't have any of that, you can use brown sugar. Just cut that and add ginger. You can add ginger. Peel the ginger. And put it there. And onion. And you can leave all this peel. You can make vegetable stock. It's very, use this peel for vegetable stock. And just put it aside and just like that. And you want to blend this puree. You can use food processor or blender. And it will become like this. I already prepared, guys. This. Isn't it beautiful? This puree. Let me mix it. Well, this is so it become like an afternoon puree. And to prepare another vegetable, I have daikon here. Okay. And then you do this. I like to make it straight. Lots of that. And this much. And carrot. I like to put carrot to make a good color. This carrot. Bunch of carrot. Wow. So take a porridge. So the porridge take 10 minutes to cook. You don't have that much time, but what to expect after you cook it? It looks like this. Porridge. Porridge. Okay, very exciting. Now we mix the paste. We have the porridge. Put the porridge in here, right? Okay. Some people don't use the porridge, but we want the paste thick in the cabbage. And you put this, the apple, ginger, garlic, onion, and exciting peppers. Wow. Just mix it all together. Very nice. You see how it thicken, like paste like this? Okay. Oh, it smells so good. I wish you could smell this. And daikon, just mix it all there. And special. I like fish sauce, but if you want to keep it vegan, don't put fish sauce. I like this. So I just put 2 tablespoons or more if you love fish sauce. And also you can add fermented shrimp and scallions. In traditional Korean, they put minari, but we don't have minari here. I just use scallions. Had it. Like this. Lee and I harvested this earlier today. So yeah, just mix it like that. It just smells so good. Okay. Now the exciting. We have this cabbage here. So there's 2 ways. You can cut this, or you can just put it in every layer. So just put it in every layer like that. And then just put it in here. So what's the difference between sauerkraut and kimchi? Sauerkraut is just salty brine you mix with green cabbage, and kimchi, you use all these ingredients to make delicious lacto-fermented food. Spicy, umami, very delicious. Okay, this is the second one. I can show you how I want it. You can use this method, cut it. And you can put it in here. It's very fast way. And try to mix it all together. And the nice thing about lacto-fermentation food, you don't need to sterilize the jar. Just need to wash them very clean, dry. And after this, you can eat it fresh. You can eat like fresh kimchi with your warm rice or ramen noodle, whatever you want. Put in dumpling. I'm gonna wash my hand. Be right back. Hi, I'm back. This is the mason jar. Already clean. I don't sterilize this. So what you want to do, take this kimchi, put it in there. Just put it in there. You can clean that later. You press it down. Until like really press it down. And you add this into that. So messy. Press it down. This is like 1% kimchi. If you want to make it with your family, you can have a huge ceramic. Press it down. And it's full. And just clean. And this, see. And cover just like that with this one, because it will have bubble come out. And when you store this, put it in a bowl, because there's sometimes liquid will come out, and put in a dark place at room temperature. You can check it once a day. In 2 or 3 days, it will start to start ferment. You will have you will know it ferment. It smells. It's amazing. And if you want to continue ferment very strong tangy flavor, you can leave it for a week and then put it in the fridge to slow the ferment. Put it in the fridge to slowing the fermentation. So that's kimchi.
Wow, thank you, Ria. So incredible. I never seen the layering method of putting it in between the leaves, and now I'm super inspired. So at this point, we're going to move to the last part of our program, which is question and answer. So just in review, we have reviewed, of course, fermentation. We've also talked about drying. We've talked about canning, and we are now ready to for any of your questions. So you can either come off mute and ask your question, or you can just type it in the chat and I'll read it off. And please don't be shy. Ria has a lifetime of experience with cooking and preserving and growing her own food in Indonesia and here, Turtle Island. So please go ahead and ask your questions. Okay, so Ria, the first question that we have for you is, which method of fermentation requires you to have all of the air at the top?
Hello? What's the question? Sorry.
Okay, so the first question is, which method of fermentation requires you to have all of the air at the top?
The air all the top. I can't understand. What does that mean?
I don't know. I mean, so this is Jamel asking it. Maybe, Jamel, do you want to come off mute and explain your question?
Yeah, hi. This was awesome, by the way. So you were saying there was a method of fermentation where there was a little bit of air at the top of the jar, and you said it was bringing out the bacteria or something like that. What was that?
Oh, okay. So that's do not let that happen. So for example, this, after you eating for example, you make this lacto fermentation, but you don't have enough, you don't have you only have half of kimchi you make, and you put it in this jar. So it's this is kimchi or sauerkraut, and there is this space of air. You don't want that happen. You want all this feel, because what happened if you let that have so much air in a container, it brings up the vegetable up and it didn't ferment. It will be like grow mold. So we want to avoid that to happen. We don't want that happen. So is that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I misunderstood. Thank you.
So I have a question. We were talking about this today, Ria, where you were saying you can ferment chard or other greens, and I've only seen that come out really, really nasty. So I'm just curious, like what tips you have fermenting things that are less common, like maybe people have tried cabbage because of sauerkraut before, or even dilly beans, but what about like chard or kale or some of those vegetables?
So for chard, you can make the brine less salty than sauerkraut. But we need to keep in mind, we don't want the temperature over 85 Fahrenheit because the salt can make the vegetable very soft, become like mushy. So with less salt, but the temperature less than 85 Fahrenheit, it will make the chard ferment really good. But using lacto fermentation method too. So yeah.
So the next question we have is from Karina, who says, I teach garden and food-based lessons to elementary schoolers. Do you have any favorite recipes involving preservation, drying, fermentation that you'd recommend for teaching to kiddos?
So I have a 3-year-old kid named Laura, and we do fermentation so much, and she loves sauerkraut. So I think sauerkraut is very good because kid can so adult can chop the cabbage, make it very slice, and kid can put their hand with salt, just hold the salt and put in cabbage, and they just hold it all together, like mix it all, and then they will see this much cabbage into this much cabbage, and they were like, whoa, amazing. So I think there's sauerkraut is a very good way to teach kids about fermentation.
All right, keep the questions coming. Another question is like, how do you decide which method to do? So say everything is coming out of the garden right now. You have cabbage, beans, tomatoes, onions, greens. Like, how do you decide which things you're going to freeze, which things you can, which things you dry? Is there certain methods that are better depending on what the food is, or you just like make it up?
For me, so like brassica, kale, collard green, cabbage, it's good for fermentation because they have like very tough or like good texture of vegetable. And for tomato, it's good for sun-dry or tomato sauce. And peppers, sometimes like harvesting, gardening, so much peppers come all at once. Drying peppers is very good because it saves us time. When you dry them, we can use multiply recipe for using dry. We can make coarse crushed peppers or make curry paste with it. So how we make curry paste with dry hot peppers? So let's say like a whole pepper already dry, and then you use that, you want to make curry paste, a spicy curry paste. So I usually soak the dry peppers into hot water to let it like soften, and then blend it with my tomato, garlic, or stuff like that. So yeah.
All right, lots of questions are coming in about fermentation. So we'll start with a quick and easy one, which was, what was the red peppers that you were using in your kimchi?
So the one that I use right now, I bought it from Asian supermarket. You want to see the brand? I'll be right back. So this one, if you go to your local Asian supermarket, you will find this. But also, if you have a lot of red peppers in my red pepper is still drying, so I didn't able to use it. So if you have red peppers, any kind of red peppers, it depends how spicy you want it. Like cayenne pepper, you can dry them and take the seed off and dry them, And then when it dry, 100% dry, you can put it in food processor or spice grinder, make it into powder. And you can use that. Any kind red peppers, when it turn into red, you can use also bell pepper if you cannot tolerate spicy, but you like the color of red. You can dry the bell pepper, dehydrate it, and then put it into food processor or spice grinder and make it into paste, something like that. So, yeah.
I love that. The drying meets the fermentation. Another fermentation question is there a difference between fermentation and lacto-fermentation? And also, are there any other favorite fermentation recipes besides kimchi that you like to make?
So, good question. What is the different lacto-fermentation? So fermentation is like the umbrella, and lacto-fermentation is like one of the fermentation type. Fermentation, so many, we can use fungi, we can use starter yeast to make fermentation. For example, miso, I love making miso. So making miso is not lacto-fermentation because miso need fungi or yeast that grow in rice, and you mix it, you cook the soybean until very soft, and you mix the salt and this fungi that grow in rice. What is it called again? Koji, and mix it there. And then the salt and the fungi live together in this paste, soybean paste, and the jar has to be sterilized with alcohol, so the bacteria is not going to live in there. And then we put this miso paste or soybean paste with koji and salt in a jar and put in room temperature, and it needs at least 6 months or many years to ferment. And I made it last February, make my miso, and I'm so excited to open it next year. So it will be like a year-old miso. So yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so lots of questions. So another one is there any way that you use honey or other natural additives when you preserve your
use honey or other natural additives?
Oh yeah, you can use so as we know, honey, there's a microorganism also live in honey. So when you mix honey with water, it create mead, like very high alcohol beverage. So yeah, I don't really understand the question though.
I think sometimes people will use honey almost and like put things inside of it in order to preserve them, kind of like you might put things inside vinegar or inside alcohol. So just wondering if that's something that you do or not so much.
Oh, okay. So that was the question. Yeah, I use honey to preserve like a fruit sometimes, but I don't do that all the time.
So another question is about preserving in vinegar. So I'm Haitian on my mother's line, and we have something called pickles, where basically you have this jar of vinegar on the counter, and you just put a lot of vegetables into it. Like you could put onion, carrot, cabbage, just really anything, and then it's used like a condiment, like a quick pickle. And just curious if you preserve it all with vinegar, and if you have any recommendations if people wanted to try that.
Yeah, preserve it with vinegar. I grew up in Indonesia. Also, my mom harvested so much fruit, and she just like put it in the vinegar and let it set in room temperature for a long time, and she just take it like onion. But I never used that method, but I saw my mom do that too. So I cannot really answer that question.
All right, we have time for a few more questions, so folks keep putting them in the chat, but in the meantime, I'll read off the ones that were sent to me privately. So somebody knows that you have maybe a book coming out and wondering how we can get a hold of Ria's amazing recipes in fermentation and beyond.
Thank you for the spoiler. Yeah, we will share all this recipe to you all with Soulfire from Cookbook, and that will be so exciting. Me and Gabriela, Chef Gabriela.
Ria's being super modest. Basically, the publishing house tracked Ria down to offer a book deal for this cookbook, which is really, really exciting. So we're all looking forward to the cookbook coming out, which will have, we should actually mention this to this group because it will have recipes from the Soulfire Farm community. So if you're not already an alum, if you're an alum, you got a survey asking if you had any recipes. But if you didn't get that, you could just email us if you have a recipe that you want Ria and Gabriela to consider for inclusion. So with the last couple minutes that we have, folks are just wondering, like, you know, if you're really new to this whole process of fermentation and drying and food preservation, maybe it's the first year you had a garden. How do you recommend people get started? Maybe like one or two things that are really simple that will build people's confidence.
For preservation, I think start with drying first. Knowing your harvesting your food, herbs, like drying your herbs and knowing that like, oh, this is dry or not. And lacto fermentation is very easy. So I think starting with sauerkraut. If you have any kind of like hard vegetable, green cabbage, you can use that like salt. I always tasting my salt, not always using recipe like 2 tablespoon recipe, but this is my tricky trick. So not as salty as ocean water, but as when you taste your tears, a little bit salty than your tears. So that's my key for fermenting, using salt for lacto fermentation. And yeah, I think, and the second tips is knowing which one mold, what color mold that not good growing on your fermentation. Like white mold, it's fine. White mold is yeast. As we know, yeast also fungi, but it's not mushroom. So yeah, I think that's my tips to starting fermentation.
Okay, one more quick question before our closing that someone messaged me. So people have been following your Instagram and they know that you are really into fungus, really into mushrooms. And so curious, you know, in this time of year when there's so many mushrooms coming and maybe you can't keep up with eating all of them, are there any tips for how you would preserve the harvest of the forest of these mushrooms?
Thank you. That's a great question. I was waiting for that. So fungi or mushrooms. So when you harvest mushroom, for example, like abundance honey mushroom, there was so many. There's 2 ways for me to preserve. The one 10 days, or 3. The 10 days way, they're like not very long time, like marinating them. So it's kind of like Italian way how they preserve their mushroom. Roast them first, wash a little bit, like brush or clean the mushroom, and then roast them first until they cook and chop them, and then add lemon juice or any acid and add olive oil. So olive oil preserve and help it will last for 10 days and put it in the fridge. And it's like a condiments for your food. Make you pass and put it in, stuff like that. And the second way is dehydrator or drying your mushroom. Drying, you can do sun-dried mushroom. Sun-dried mushroom is very good for collect vitamin D as long as the mushroom has the gill. So gill upside down, facing up, sun-dry. And dehydrator or oven, it lasts for years for dry. You can add it into stock or add it into your soup. Like if you ever eat ramen, instant ramen, there's always dry shiitake. That's how it is. Like you just boil them and you will like saute or stuff like that, make it into stock. Delicious. And the third is freezing them. But I would suggest when you freeze mushroom, you cook them first and add olive oil or butter or any kind of fat and put in the freezer. It will last for 8 months. So that's how I preserve my mushroom. Thank you.
That's incredible. I learned that from you, that the mushrooms will only collect vitamin D if you put their gills up, and then that goes in your body. And so many of us have vitamin D deficiency, so it's great to know. So I'm going to ask folks now, we're going to do a couple of things in closing. One is if you can write in the chat one thing that you learned that you think you'll try, just so we have a sense of what is a new thing you learned, like I'm going to dry my mushrooms gill side up. That's what I'm going to do. What are you all going to do? So write that in the chat. And then if we could also all just come off of mute and give a big thank you to Ria for sharing her knowledge with all of us, we'd really appreciate that. So let's go ahead and say hello to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's fantastic.
Great, Ria.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Ria.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Wow. Send you all hugs and love.
Same here. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Is Bubba there? The boy, I told you to go say hi. Say hi. Okay.